guess what? Like, people are not gonna stick to the old traditional ways of doing things. People always talk about, okay, what are the Web2 companies that we can bring to Web3? Well, if you bring Web2 companies as is to Web3, the expectations will not be met.
Hey everyone, and welcome yet to another episode of NewForm. NewForm is powered by Newcoin Foundation and is focused on fostering the expansion of decentralized social applications, also known as Social 3.0, by forming an ecosystem and a community of visionaries, creators, and investors to spark conversations on the topics of crypto, the Metaverse, NFTs, and everything Web3.
And on this episode of NewForm, we're really happy to have Suman with us. He's the founder and CEO at personal.ai, a consumer AI in Web3 startup to create, own, and monetize the utility from personal AIs focusing on individuality. He's also the founder of Aira, AR for the blind, and recognized as Time Magazine's best invention and Fast Company's world-changing ideas. We're going to talk with Suman about the influence of AI in Web3 and the future of AI in the Metaverse. Hey, Suman, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
So, Suman, could we maybe start with how are you today, and could you tell us a bit about yourself and also personal AI?
Myself, let's see, I'm an engineer, and majority of my time I've been spending time creating products. After getting like my robotics passion behind me, I did a lot of open source projects as well, like during the Linux times, and a couple of fintech products. I was there at Intuit. Created a smart wallet, and then started creating companies. My previous company is called Aira, as Salimi was mentioning before. And I picked up this passion that how can we solve the problems that are closer to individuals and individual human beings, and use the technology to augment them at a greater degree. So you're generally always looking for hard problems that are focused on biological in nature to people, and then applying technology to solve them.
That's quite incredible. I mean, I think I'd want to hear more about Aira, because most of the time when I hear people talk about AI, it's mostly about it has to do with more of like the aesthetic of things, and more so than solving some sort of like a social or, like some sort of like a social issue, I'd say. And so I find it really fascinating that you decided to go that part, because sometimes I'm like, one day someone's going to create this AI that's going to like do some crazy stuff, because especially when it comes to the Metaverse, there's almost like this competition of who's going to create the better AI, also. So I'm just like, we're going to keep going, and someone will like go wild, and we won't be able to go back. So anyway, I'd love to hear more about the.
No, I think you are touching on something super fundamental to our talk. I mean, who we are as people. I think you're jumping right in, which is fantastic. So, I mean, let's think about it, right? I mean, usually, like, I'm passionate about this core idea that how do you solve the problem and not the human? So, in the previous company that you're referring to, which is Aira, majority of the investments and research that existed and the technology that existed was about how to solve the problem of seeing for people who are visually impaired and blind. But if you just simply think about how do you solve the problem of missing visual information for blind people using augmented reality, using AI, using humans in the loop, that like literally changed how people experience life day to day. Like, so it's not about just getting from point A to point B, but for these people, the vastness of experience that, the world offers when you go to Disneyland or when you travel to different places and doing all that independently is mind-blowing. So generally, I start with an approach of what is the like a true core of the problem that we are solving. And in this company, that philosophy kind of carries with the personal AI. And in this company, at the core, is that people create a lot of experiences every day. We consume a lot of things every day, but we are also losing lots of information and memories that are associated with it every day as well. So in other words, we are not making decisions in the sum total of our life experiences. We are creating like more and more, almost like the gaps between people. Like, how do I learn from experiences of like Joyce, and how can Joyce create more from her own experience from the past? So the fundamental premise is that people do forget often and a lot more than they possibly imagine. So how can we use AI to capture more of your lives, create the AI to almost augment you as an individual? By virtue of augmenting you, you would also are creating value and access and utility of one individual provides to the people around them. So the idea of the personal AI is not to create like this huge AI that, that's better than every other AI. The idea of the AI, personal AI, is to create individual AI that is augmenting their individual experiences, that is helping create their experiences further, elevate experiences further, and for the people around them, create a mechanism, a communication medium, a alternate, deeper, establishing deeper connection to that individual that doesn't exist right now. Like, we have, we call like start talking about like social and social three, right? We have all these different mediums. People, thought leaders write in Twitter, they do it in Medium, they do it in Substack, they do it in various different platforms. But if you think about what's happening in there, the AI or the utility of the AI is only creating value to the platform, right? You read an article, in a platform such as Medium, you would get another article within the same platform. You're not getting another thought from the same person. You're not establishing a deeper connection to the creator, right? You are only establishing deeper engagement and locking into the platform. We want to change that narrative. We want to extract that utility from the AI that is locked into the platform and give it to the individual. And that's kind of the whole Web3 play come into play as well.
So basically, are algorithms AI in a technical sense? Are they based on the AI? Like, is it like an AI, or what would you say algorithms, how they play in there?
Yeah, so I mean, AI is nothing but code, right? It's basically a model, and every model requires certain amounts of data, right? So generally, the applications of AI today is more dominant in places where there is lots of data, because you aggregate, huge amounts of data to get like utility out of it. So if you think about what you're experiencing on Amazon, right? You search for a product, you get a product, and then you'll have some recommendations on what are the alternate products that you can potentially look for. And for that is helping, that AI algorithm is helping recommend other products, so that way the consumers can shop more on Amazon. Same thing with content consumption. Like for creators who are creating content, they're creating content on TikTok, but the algorithms or the recommendation systems are basically giving you alternate mechanisms, so that you are locked into that particular platform. So yeah, so these basically it's basically code. In our case, the models is extracting the utility from the individual experiences, right? It's individuals' data. Doesn't matter if you're creating on Twitter, Substack, somewhere else. We basically capture and create all this, take all this unstructured data and create like a structured memory vault. We call it a memory stack. So think about like every experience that you're facing today, you have in multiple different platforms. You basically structure that into your own memory vault that you own. It is private to you, and it is also guaranteed ownership using blockchain. We use Oasis blockchain. But not only that, the code, the algorithm that you're talking about, extracts the utility or the value from your own data. Meaning if you write like few blogs and few tweets and few podcasts, your AI is going to, help you create your blogs for you, your tweets for you, from the experiences that you are creating. And Salimi can interact with Joyce for the things that she would want thought leadership from you without you physically being present in a place, right? So in a way, we are like trying to reflect or replicate or create this mirror of your mind into a digital model.
That's really interesting. I feel like I want to hear more about it, but yeah, it's really interesting how these algorithms work. And sometimes when I'm scrolling through some of the social media platforms, and how it kind of like captures what I did previously, and it keeps feeding me just because I liked one thing, just like my whole life. And we had one guest on, and we were talking about how, like, for instance, a woman might have been looking at like pregnancy stuff, maybe baby stuff, but then they lost their baby in the end, right? But then they go on Instagram or like some social media platform, and they're still being fed with baby stuff, and how different, that's quite a sad situation. And I think this type of things keep happening, and it makes this whole AI thing really, or algorithms, really interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, like existing algorithms, which we call them general models, which is trained on aggregation of the data. I mean, they create good utility, which is nothing they created because they were trying to create consumer experiences, which is all fine. But, along the way, there were issues, there was societal biases, there were, misinformation that is kind of like spread. Not that personal AI will solve everything in the world, but the approach that we are trying to take is we do not want to create a AI simply to make it work and extract the utility for the platforms. We are trying to augment, elevate individual experiences and carry the trust with their own AI model, so that the ownership, the authenticity, the biases in opinions, it's all locked into one individual. It's no different than having an email account. You would have your own personal AI that is living alongside with you. It's replicating and learning you as a person. And once you have that, then the opportunities are endless. Like you are talking about, potentially your AI helping you not just recall things and create things, but other people who are around you continuously can interact with it as if you would. And it would we create like something called a trust score. It goes into the concept of like proof of memory, meaning every response has an associated underlying data and underlying ownership. So you can technically attach ownership of what AI has created down to the individual level. And I think that is very fascinating because there are no existing models right now that actually do it.
What if somebody might be gone, like an artist, but they can still tweet, or their memory, or like you said, that can still live on, like it sounds
right.
like very bizarre, but it's actually, like, when you think about it, it could be possible, and I'm wondering, what do you think about what are the cons and pros of, like, I have a little bit of experience with AI generated content, so like art, or we are experimenting a bit within our company with like artworks and fashion and
Sure.
AI generated stuff. And I'm wondering, for like artists, creators, all these things, like what are the cons and pros of like this AI generated content?
Yeah, I think it's mostly about understanding of how these AIs are different, right? So when you talk about like AI generated content, majority of the content generation that exists today are based on the models that are learning from the general knowledge or internet knowledge or Wikipedia knowledge, right? Everything that is available in public. It doesn't have an identity. You are generating the content based on aggregation of all this data, but it doesn't have the personality and authenticity of you as an individual. So those models were great. They work great in the marketing use cases for creation. But if you are like trying to tell a story from all your experiences from yesterday, and if you want your AI generate content, that AI doesn't understand like your perspective on your story that has been created yesterday, right? So what we are trying to do is, the techniques are similar, but the foundation to these models is the individual and the individual creations and experiences and content. So that generated content that you're talking, Joyce, you can think about capturing your life yesterday and have your AI write a story or a novel or a blog for you, like from your own experiences, right? That is your voice. That's entirely different from generated content of the AI that is general models.
That's really interesting. Like really, really interesting. I'm just thinking about all of like my personal like photos and memories and things that I might not even be aware of that I have on my phone, on my laptop. And how this is kind of like also like a memory of me, and how AI can, it's really fascinating, I think.
Yeah,
it is. I think, I'm not sure if this applies to AI. It's like, how when you your phone kind of automatically sends you these like memories or stuff like that, like when you have an iPhone. And sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't want to see these memories, like where are they coming back to me? But then it's like you don't really have a control. But also, you were talking a bit about the generated content, and so I wanted to know, like when you create like an AI content, for example, maybe with an NFT, AI generated collections, is the intellectual property yours?
No. So the NFT, we issue a NFT around individual personal AI. So for example, Joyce will have Joyce.personal.ai, and there will be an NFT attached to Joyce.personal.ai. People can buy, like, let's say, the token of Joyce, and then me, Suman, will have access to Joyce's AI on all her thoughts around, let's call, marketing, right? And then I can interact with her. Pretty much the data is yours, the model is yours. There is obviously economy that revolves around you. So we also are creating mechanisms for people to monetize their own personal AIs, right? Similar to how you would monetize your experiences, right? I mean, that's what you do, like your job and create, right? So your AI should be also working alongside with you in that capacity.
But if I have like an NFT collection and I have an AI generating that for me, it's not, all of these NFTs are not mine, like the art itself, right? The IP.
Yeah. So in our case, it will be yours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because if I put all this work in and I'm making all this grand collection, and then, oh shoot, it's not even mine,
Yeah. So our tokenomics is a token distribution that basically has a percentage that goes into the developers of it, which will be like the company of personal AI. But the goal is to create a microeconomy around individual creator. They own their stacks. It's actually private to them. In other words, you can create your AI and you don't have to choose to share with anybody, right? It's still be yours. But if you are thinking about like monetizing your AI, then that's when you would issue your coin that people can buy in, or you can, simply, I guess, depending on what you want people to do. Like if you have 100 fans, it could be a different kind of pricing curve, if you will. Or if you have, 1 million fans, then it would be a, different curve. It all depends on what creator would want to do with their AI. And the most interesting thing in here is, so far, the existing NFTs, if you think about it, you create an art piece, which is fantastic, and you have a value, right? You don't know if the value is going to appreciate or depreciate. In our case, the digital asset that we create for people is their AI. There's a personal AI, and that's their digital asset. And guess what? The personal AI as a digital asset only grows in value because your life experiences are only increasing and ever contributing to your own AI, right? It's continuously learning, and to the point where it's actually could potentially add value, beyond lifetime as well, right? So, so I think our core focus right now is for thought leaders and for creators who are creating content every day, to create like an alternate medium for their consumers to interact with that content and get even more closer to establishing that connection, with the creator, with the thought leader. That's where we are focusing on, because right now there is no utility. Like we want to bring that utility to the data that people are owning, the creators are owning in the Web3 space. There is data ownership, but there is no utility. So that's the whole idea of AI in Web3, because AI is locked into the platforms. That's where algorithms are working. You need to get the algorithms and apply and learn it on the data that you own.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good, because we're all just giving our data out for free every day, everywhere, and it's good that there's people like you who create mechanisms to actually protect that data and to, own, like, I think it can be beneficial in so many ways. But what do you think is like the most, like, for you, for your use case, like what do you see is like for you the biggest advantage of decentralization and also AI?
It's access, right? So if you think about, if I want to have an interaction around the thoughts that are happening in Elon Musk's brain during the Twitter acquisition, right now I'm a passive consumer of potentially what he tweets out, right? Imagine me being able to access, some of the thoughts of what's going on in his brain and interact with it, with an AI. Like, that would have characteristics, authenticity, and voice of that person. That is the new communication medium that we are unlocking. From a decentralization perspective, we want to protect the ownership and authenticity of the individual. We want to give the data ownership to the individual and guarantee it, and as well use the platforms or blockchains ability to create smart contracts around the tokenomics to create microeconomy around them. There are existing creator communities, creator clients, and one of the fundamental differences between existing creator clients of the platforms to us is, in our case, the utility is baked in along in the platform of personal AI, which is your utility. It's not extracting the utility of a platform, it is extracting the utility of you. So it's the fundamental difference around our creator clients versus others. And we haven't launched yet, so we are actually recruiting more and more thought leaders who would go through creating their AIs and allowing their consumers or fans to interact with their AIs, reap the benefits from it, and then ultimately launch their coin.
I think this can be like an amazing tool for creators to, like you said, the fan engagement aspect as well. Like if I have like a whole world or like something, I really am into aesthetics. So now I could use that with my AI and give this to my fans, or can share that world, which I don't want to share with everyone, but with my 100 best fans or friends, like I want to share. And that is, I think, like I really like that idea of you can share these like memories and you can create new things, and that's really amazing. And also you own that AI. That's incredible.
Yeah, if you guys know Reddit, for example. So Reddit has like models where they aggregate all the data. But what I'm trying to say is it's a community where people interact their ideas and exchange their ideas. Basically like building that community that is centered around one individual where people can exchange and interact with AIs.
I guess we touched a little bit on blockchain. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think like the blockchain technology has enabled when it comes to decentralization and ownership, and I guess redefining what accessibility and ownership means to the average person, and how do you see like the gateways to ownership open through Web3 and decentralization, and what are the key ways that people will be able to benefit from decentralized ownership?
I mean, a lot, right? So the idea of the decentralization and the ownership is more about the things that you are creating, meaning like, okay, you buy things physically and you keep them at home and they are appreciating or depreciating in asset. In the decentralization world, the whole idea is you are owning a piece of digital asset. And today, majority of the digital assets that people are familiar with are NFTs in the form of art, right? But it's not limited to creating more additional digital assets that are core to the content, for example, as well as core to your own mind and the synthesis of that mind and ideas. So decentralization for us will go in multiple different capacities, which is this core idea that it's not a general aggregated model of AI. The model is now decentralized down to the individual level. Everybody gets their own unique model. So that's like step one. Step two is the data that people are creating right now is owned by the platforms. Now we are trying to create a mechanism for almost all the data that you create on the internet in your own memory stack and own it for yourself, right? And finally, like, how do you kind of monetize this utility associated with it? So blockchain basically allows those three principles and creates, I guess, mechanisms for us to create smart contracts. I don't know like how much you guys are deep into like the crypto technologies, but we use Oasis Labs. Oasis Labs is one of the blockchain platforms out there for decentralized identity. So every creator gets a decentralized identity from the get-go. Their private key, of course, is an Oasis chain, and that will be used for the encryption. And the models are also protected by the secure enclave on the chain. And then the tokens, tokenization and the smart contracts, of course, are on blockchain. Oasis loves blockchain that has bridging mechanisms back into Ethereum. So there's like a lot of technical terms over there, but yeah, I mean, It's almost like too perfect in terms of timing, in terms of convergence of technologies of what AI could do, what blockchain could do, and how we can put both of these pieces together to solve real meaningful problems to people.
Well said, well said. And speaking about like the, I guess, ownership, and we touched a bit on creators, do you see that the ownership economy we're building with, like, I guess, Web3 tools could have any significant global impact on social mobility?
I believe so. I mean, so internet has increased our social mobility to a certain degree already. Existing platforms in Web2 has also provided that mechanism. One of the things that I tell people, and maybe it's a little bit too abstract, is that like Web3 today is moving forward with this idea of the data ownership. Just with the data ownership, you wouldn't be increasing the social mobility to a greater degree. You need to start growing the utility associated with it, with the data that you own. It's not just about Web3 as a technology will increase it. It has to have an associated communication and utility, and continue to grow as well. Because guess what? Like people are not gonna stick to the old traditional ways of doing things. People always talk about, okay, what are the Web2 companies that we can bring to Web3? Well, if you bring Web2 companies as is to Web3, the expectations will not be met. You got to continue creating new utility in Web3 from the ground up. You will always talk about, oh, who is going to create like Twitter for in the Web3? Well, guess what? If it is just Twitter in Web3, there is already Twitter out there. People are not going to get the utility. So if you want to get more people from Web2 to Web3, you carry the utility from Web2 and increase the utility while going into the Web3. And that's where like personal AI comes in, because this is not just taking your existing data and putting on the Web3 so that you can own it. You got to have the like utility around it, and grow that as well in a novel way, which is the personal AI piece of it.
Yeah, I think we always wonder that, like, with Web3 and Web2, and are we like there? And like, sometimes you see things and it's like, it almost seems too perfect to be true. And you're like, okay, like, where is the centralized thing in the back? Or, like, we are not there yet. And I like what you said, like that we cannot build on the Web2 foundation. We have to take the utility from Web2, but then include like the new ownership ways. And it's just a different mindset as well, like for me personally. And I think there can be like a lot of friction with all the startups and things that are building right now, but it's like good because we are exploring, and that's what's supposed to happen right now in this time. So yeah, I'm really happy that you're on and you're sharing your point of view. I think that we didn't had somebody talk so intensely about AI yet, and I think that's really valuable.
I mean, we are not gonna grow the core base or migrate all the people in the world from Web2 to Web3 just with the data ownership. That I can solve, right? If you think about why people use Facebooks or TikToks or Twitter or whatever, they were really good at creating the consumer utility. I mean, they were really good, and that's the reason why you had like your Facebook accounts or like any other accounts. So just by saying, hey, if you come in here and then you can own all your data is not enough. You got to create, okay, what is the data ownership and the utility mean in this space for people to come over? Otherwise, the 2% will remain 2% in Web3. We got to grow Web3 from 2% to 98%.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wanna like be there in Web3 and then you cannot use it, or you're just like they're in the metaverse running against walls. So yeah, there's a reason why like the apps that we use are popular, because they're user friendly and everyone uses them. So yeah, I ask myself this every day, but I'm excited to see where the space is going. And so yeah, thank you so much, Suman, for sharing your story, and I cannot wait to see where personal AI is heading in the future. And where can our audience find you on social platforms?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on personal.ai and Suman.ai. So I think the best probably at this stage would be my Twitter, which is Suman Kanuganti. If you start searching SUMAN, it should show up. And yeah, if you are a creator or a thought leader, go ahead and create your personal AI, and it's a new, refreshing way to interact with your own fans and get them, understand you more.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Suman. I mean, this was great. And again, I really love what you're doing with Aira. I think I'm gonna look more into that because I'm personally interested in that. And we'll be following your future projects as well. And I think, like Joyce said, this was great. We haven't really chatted about AI, and so this was quite refreshing to have that as part of our content. And thank you so much again. And thank you, Joy. And thank you all for being a part of today's forum. And if you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. IG is newcoin.nco and our website is newcoin.org. And you can also join our private Telegram group. We will have all the links as well as Suman's links in the description below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And we will see you in the next episode.